Okay, hey, good morning. I want to do something a little bit different today. I've been publishing the last couple of days on positioning and packaging for a small business, for a solopreneurship, for turning a passion into a side hustle into a business, that sort of thing. But today I wanted to kind of teach the equation that I think kind of solves every problem, or at least shows you where to look in your business. If you are trying to do anything as far as business goes, or you have a nonprofit or any kind of organization that you're running that requires you to pursue people, to sell a product, sell a service, and then get paid for that service. And so this was an equation that I learned a long time ago, but I just keep on coming back to it. And the more that I spend with it, the more that I teach it within Psychedelic Professional, the more that I recognize just how important it is to understand each variable and keep coming back to it. So starting from top to bottom, it goes, leads times conversions equals your number of clients. When you have your number of clients, you take that and you multiply it by the number of transactions, and then you multiply that by the average dollar amount per transaction. That gives you your revenue. You take your revenue, you multiply it times your margins, which is just how much profit you're keeping after your costs, and that gives you profit. So I'm going to break all of that down again because I know that's kind of fast just to try to understand, like all at once. But the up top first, right? You've got leads times conversions equals clients. So your first two variables are leads and conversions. So in order to get leads, you've got a few different ways that you can do that. The first way is you can pay for leads via advertising. I do not suggest this out of the gate. A lot of times ads will just reveal a weakness actually in your chain, or a lack of momentum. They certainly won't generate any momentum unless you have a very good plan for how you're using them. So you can pay for them. That is a way, and sometimes it is highly effective, just depending on your state. You have to really understand what you're doing with them. And then the next way is organic content. So you're producing things on social media. This would be an example of organic content. Organic content is great. It builds trust with your audience, but it also takes a long time to see results from. Doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, but it's certainly not something that you can just start doing and expect immediate results from. There's referrals. Referrals are wonderful, obviously. Like, we want to build businesses that work really well off of referrals, and that, keep people recommending you to their friends and their family because they've had success with you. Obviously, a wonderful thing to have, but it's also not something that you can just create out of thin air. It takes time to build that network. And then the fourth one is cold outreach. And cold outreach is the thing that almost nobody does. They're scared to do it. They don't want to do it. They don't want to believe that it can work, but it is the most effective way to gain clients. It's amazing that you can go sit down on your computer and do some research and find a client that you think you resonate with, and that you can help. You understand their problem, and you can solve it in a unique and special way. And then you can reach out to them, and you can start a conversation with them. Doesn't always work, but it works a lot quicker and a lot more effectively than a lot of these other strategies. So that's leads, right? We're getting leads, but just because you have a ton of leads doesn't mean that they're good quality leads. So this is also a really important thing to remember too. And that kind of brings us into the conversion rate. So when we are converting, when we're trying to convert leads into customers or clients, there's so many different things that you can take into account here. But one of the main things that you can do is you can improve your conversion rate by clarifying your outcome. So a lot of people will say, like, man, I want to do this super general thing. I want to get this whole field, and I don't want to limit the amount of people that come across my desk, or have a conversation with me. But in a lot of ways, that is pretty silly, because you're going to end up wasting your time and wasting other people's time with a lot of misaligned clients or misaligned leads. So instead of trying to capture everyone with this wide net, we want to get specific, and you want to capture exactly the person that you can solve a problem for. So clarifying your outcome is the first thing. And if you're seeing a lot of leads come in, but you're having trouble with your conversion rate, a lot of times that can also be just a signal to you that you need to improve your closing sequence. And so a lot of times that's email automation. People, I mean, just think about the last time you purchased something online. How many times, how many touch points it actually took for you to believe in what you were seeing, and then click that button that said purchase and actually spend your hard-earned dollars on it. And there's so many different things that are involved in this. I'm not going to go super into detail because today I just want to keep it about kind of like the macro approach to this equation. So you've got leads, and then you've got times your conversion rate, that equals your clients. Once you have your clients, we want to figure out what our revenue is, right? And so we take our number of clients and we multiply that by the next two variables, and that's average dollar of transaction and number of transactions. So with number of transactions, one of the primary things you can do if you need to increase that number of transactions is you think about what a value ladder might look like for you. And so, you're not trying to solve multiple different problems. You're solving the same problem in multiple different ways for people. And the further or the higher up they walk on that value ladder of yours, then the more money they're going to pay, because then the closer they're getting to you. And so with that value ladder, you're going to naturally increase the number of transactions that people have with you. And that value ladder looks a lot like, okay, at the bottom, you do it yourself, with this prompt, with this messaging, with this worksheet, with this instruction manual. You do it yourself. And then you walk up a little bit, and then I do it with you. Right. And so maybe that's in a group setting, that's a group course, a group class. It's it can be very high touch or not, depending on what you're doing. And then that final rung is I do it for you. And so you've got all of these different options for people to interact with you on, depending on what their need is, what their budget constraints are, all of these things. And again, that's the same problem that you're solving. You're not solving different ones. You're solving the same problem in different ways for the person that is most aligned for each one of those rungs of your value ladder. Moving beyond number of transactions, you've got the average dollar amount per transaction. And so this, I have found, is the primary lever to pull for most people. This is kind of the path to freedom, I think. And that doesn't mean that you can just charge whatever the hell you want just because you want to make more money. Obviously, there has to be like proof in the pudding. But I don't even think that that's the concern. The concern is actually the opposite. Like, most people aren't charging what they deserve to be earning. And so that is automatically kind of, it's excluding a group of clients that see that price tag and they say, "Oh, that's probably not what I want. That's not. I want something premium, and I want something that's really, really worth me spending my money on." And so, with this, right, if you're increasing your prices, you will exclude some people, but that's okay, because by excluding maybe like the bottom 10% of people that you're serving already, you're freeing up more time for yourself. And when we talk about margins, time is just a sunk cost. And so every second, every minute, every hour really that you're spending on your business and not getting paid what you deserve, that's a sunk cost. That goes into your margins, right? Because you're paying yourself out of what you're earning. And so, yeah, this average dollar amount per transaction is a really interesting thing to take a look at for what you're doing. And again, like, you don't change one of these variables and then just see automatic results the next day. Changing one variable affects how the whole equation kind of plays out, and it takes time to kind of settle into it, right? Because a lot of times, if you raise your prices, you've been doing things a certain way, and you realize, oh, I have to do things a little bit differently now, or maybe I free up a little more time that I can make this product a little bit higher quality now, and so it justifies me raising this price, that sort of thing. So we've got clients times number of transactions times average dollar amount per transaction. That gives us revenue. with our revenue, that's not take home, right? Because it costs us money to run our business. And so then we run into margins. And so this is something really interesting, right? So when I sold my gym, I had a brick and mortar gym for eight plus years. And when I sold it in 2024, I was like, man, I am never going to run a brick and mortar operation again because the margins were so stressful. And so, one of the primary signs of needing to kind of like reimagine your margins a little bit and work on them is if your revenue is rising but you feel poorer. And that was really, really common when I was in the gym. I had this I started off with nothing. There was nothing in there, and I started filling it with all kinds of equipment. And by the time I sold it, I had like $250,000 of equipment in there. And even though we had all these new people, and the number on the page was growing, right? Like we were going from, I don't know what I started at, like just chump change. Let's say like, maybe 5,000 a month, if even. And then, it was growing to, we were having $30,000 months, or $40,000, $50,000 months. And even though that number was going up, the cost of that between marketing and equipment and increased rent and all these other things, that cost was going up too. So it didn't necessarily reflect the kind of growth that I wanted. And so, their margins, basically this is a whole pitch for running a digital business. But, that's obviously not to say that a brick and mortar can't work. There's tons of successful brick and mortars. So anyways, yes, you've got your margins, right? Your overhead, your costs. And so that's always something that is really interesting to evaluate in your business. And from that, revenue times margin equals your profit. So from the top again, the variables, we've got leads times conversions, your first two variables, and then that gives you your clients. When you have your clients, the number of clients, you multiply that by number of transactions and then the average dollar amount per transaction, and that gives you your revenue. When you have your revenue, you multiply that by your margin, and then you have your profit. And so now the next thing is like, okay, well, how do I know where to attack? What variable do I need to change in order to feel better about my business? And so I've got a few questions here that examine exactly that. And this is, very, very basic. These aren't all of the answers, right? But it's a good general indication of where to look if you're feeling a certain way about your business. So if you feel anxious about money, that usually suggests a top of funnel issue. So leads or conversion, something like that. You don't have enough new customers to provide you value. And so you need to imagine that or reimagine that. The second one, if you feel busy but broke, that's almost definitely a pricing issue or a margins issue. Maybe you're spending too much. You're either not charging enough or you're spending too much. The third one, if you feel booked but resentful, you've probably got too many clients or too many transactions. And so that kind of goes back to that. Okay, maybe I increase my cost. Maybe I fire or I graduate my bottom 10% of clients, and you'll feel a lot better. Number four, if you feel stable but capped out, then you probably need to increase your transaction cost or the number of transactions. Again, same kind of answer there. And then if you feel growth hungry, make sure you check your margins first, and then hopefully you've got, if you're growth hungry, it usually suggests like, okay, I've been making enough. I feel stable right now. So hopefully you've got a little bit of a reserve. And so if you've got decent margins and a good reserve, then it's like, okay, like what do I need to invest in order to scale? So yeah, one more time from the top, you've got your leads times conversions, and that gives you your total number of clients. Clients times number of transactions times dollar amount per transaction, and that gives you your revenue. Then you take your revenue, you multiply it by your margins, and that gives you profit. And at the end of the day, profit is really the only number that truly matters in business. And you can manipulate these other variables to change what that number is. But if your profit is healthy, then your business is healthy. And so if this kind of resonated for you, this is kind of just a taste of what I teach in Psychedelic Professional. This was obviously very superficial. We dive way in. I've got a cohort coming up September of this year. 4 of the 10 spots have already been claimed. But I am doing an early bird special here, $300 off with early bird 300. I'll leave the link. I'll leave the link below, and that runs through June. So yeah, if you've got any questions, you can always reach out as well. And yeah, I hope this was helpful to you. Cheers. Have a great day.